Want to welcome you back to Curiosity, Not Judgment. My name is Birga.
And I'm Gary.
So last week we had some conversation around kind of qualifications and when can you put certain things on your resume or when can you list some professional proficiencies underneath your name. It was an interesting thought process, but then spurred some additional questions within us about some of those I am statements that we might make. And it goes something like this. You walk into a social setting, you've got new people in front of you, you reach out your hand to introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Birga. Hi, I'm Gary. I am blank. And you usually proceed to fill that in with your profession. But is that really who you are?
You know, it's funny that you say that. I know that I read or heard something recently that someone said, when someone asks you, what do you do? You answer with whatever it takes, right? And I love that one. You know, whatever it takes to figure out what I'm trying to do in this given moment. I think that identifying with your job and your position can be not useful, can be dangerous even. I think it can be, if you identify with your job, what happens when you get let go?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not your job. I will state that as a definition. You are not your job. You are many things. You are a husband, a wife, a daughter, a son, a parent, a fellow part of your community, a person at the end of your block of other home dwellers. You are many, many things. Your job is not everything that you are.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be careful, as we've discussed before. Language is important. What is the purpose of you saying, I am this? You know, I'm a rocket scientist. I'm an engineer. I'm a Sandia National Labs employee. I am. And a lot of people are interested in that. But there's probably as many or more people interested in, you know, I'm an amateur solar eclipse observer, and I run around the world. By the way, this group exists. And I run around the world going to various solar eclipses. Or I'm a dog lover, and I specifically like this one breed, and the thing I like about that breed is this. To me, that's much more fascinating.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, wow, tell me more about that. I have a colleague who is graduated from Harvard and is an amazing talent and intelligence person. They're literally living in graduate quarters at MIT because their wife is in grad school at MIT. And let's get past the school rivalries part of that joke, which is funny. But you know, what does he say when he tells people? You know, I'm a renewable energy modeler.
Okay.
I am the spouse of a MIT graduate student.
Okay.
I am a Harvard graduate living on an MIT campus. I am, you know what I'm saying? So he's a fascinating guy, and I really I enjoy my conversations with him. But he's way more than what his job is.
Right.
And you know, and so one could ask the question, why do we do that?
Well, you know, I think often about your levels of engagement or involvement with somebody, from somebody who's potentially serving you a meal all the way to somebody that maybe you're going to be introduced to in a family setting as an in-law or somebody that's, you know, you're going to be spending a lot of time with. What is the level of engagement?
True.
So if you're having a casual conversation at a party with someone you likely will never see again, probably I am a electrical engineer will suffice, right? I mean, great, nice to meet you. They go on their merry way. But I think if the perception is there's a curiosity about that person and you want to engage a little bit more deeply, maybe converting your answer to something a little more cheeky would go a long way in prompting further conversation and might lead to a deeper level of interest.
Yeah, and again, you're exactly right. It depends on the situation, depends on the level of involvement. You personally know this for a fact because you've had to email people this. I like to say I'm the world's best grandfather, and quite frankly, I am. But
Quite frankly, huh?
But well, I'll argue with anyone against it. But and I hope some of my grandkids think so. But that's not the point. That's to me, that is creating a different dynamic than. Let me tell you all the reasons I'm up here on stage talking to you.
Oh, yes.
I don't like the 5-minute introduction about how many degrees and how many papers they've written and how many this and that and that. Now look, you got to develop your street cred on your first PowerPoint slide or in your introduction so that people know that they should listen to you. But I'd much rather listen to somebody who's interesting about any topic than somebody who's boring and wants to tell me why they're so much better than me and why I should listen to them on a given subject.
Oh, you just brought something to memory. So I had a speaking engagement where I was the MC. I've done this a few times, and I had the bio of somebody I was supposed to welcome to stage, and it was a half page or a 3/4 page bio. And I'm getting through the first couple lines, and then my brain checks out, if I'm being honest. And then I was trying to be clever and funny, and I said, "Oh my gosh, there's so much more to this, but you don't want to hear that part. You want to hear them speak. Please welcome so-and-so to stage," right? And I had a couple people thank me for that, but I think I might have miffed the person that I was introducing because some people really put a lot of stock into that 3/4 page bio.
Yeah, and you probably just defined somebody I wouldn't want to listen to. And this is the point. I thought your response to that situation is totally appropriate, which is why you never put the most important thing last in a bio, because
Yeah.
you're not the only person who does that. But I would say this. Wouldn't it be way more interesting to have 3 lines about what the person's passionate about than all the things that are supposed to build the credibility for the person to stand in front of you and tell me? The more I have to prove to somebody that they should listen to me, I think the less credibility I have. Why don't we just start talking and have them perceive that I've got some important things to say or something worth listening to?
Well, I think this goes back to so many conversations that we've had about this deep need for human connection and for our hearts and our minds to be able to find some string of similarity or commonality. And so if you've got a 3/4 page bio that has to do with, a field that I am not employed in and I don't understand a lot of the things that you're explaining, chances are I am checking out before you even begin speaking because I have no association, I have no familiarity or connection with you. But if that person is willing to be a little bit subdued in their introduction and find points of resonance and connection with others, I think you've already won some approvers in the audience because they're listening to you from a point of connection.
Right. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
It's a really good point because I think, and by the way, let's just make the parenthetical statement here that we're not judging you for having a 3/4 page bio.
Well, I'm trying not to.
Well, and we're not. We are curious, not judgmental.
Yes, that's right.
But the point of this is, should you ask yourself the question instead of just drifting through life or thinking the longer my bio, the more credibility I have, ask yourself the question: how am I going to connect with this audience? What's the best way to connect to this audience? And then you might think, maybe a 3/4 bio isn't the way to do it. In other words, don't drift through life doing things just because someone told you should or because you think it's the accepted norm. Think about what's your goal and then how to achieve that goal.
Yeah.
And I would think that most times you go through that process, you probably wouldn't come up. Now, if your audience is a bunch of PhDs and you're presenting a paper for peer review,
Sure.
absolutely.
Different situation.
Go on. You should have a 1.5-page bio. But in most situations where you're a keynote or you're a speaker in a situation of 20 to 2,000 people, they're there to gain something from some experience that you've had that will help them in their travels in life. And usually that doesn't need to be preceded by a 3/4 page bio.
Yeah. I had a role once where the not policy, but the practice was when a new employee came on board, they got the opportunity to get up and introduce themselves before other employees, and they had to answer 3 questions. So we live in the state of New Mexico, and our unofficial state question is red or green, and that refers to chili.
Yeah.
And so, do you have a preference for red or green chili?
Green.
Well, okay. So, and I would say it depends. And so that is one of those questions that those of us that have been in New Mexico for any length of time are very familiar with, and
have a ready answer for it.
Have a ready answer, and also there's almost kind of a team spirit about that. We even have we call it a minor league baseball team, and one of the big gags is during, I don't know, the 5th inning or something, there's a mascot of red chili and green chili.
And they do a race.
That's
That's
you know,
right.
and they always fight
Sometimes
it out
with
at
a
the
taco.
end. Sometimes with a taco, yeah. But the point being, it's a question that is thrown in there to allow somebody to answer genuinely, but then also to have some level of connection. And almost everybody has some sort of a story or some caveat
Absolutely.
as to why they pick what they pick. But you know, I think there's value to when you're introducing yourself to a new group of people and you want to connect, you know, maybe aside from the bio, which may be important, you need to develop your credibility professionally, but maybe to throw in some of those common things and then also be willing to hear the responses of others, because you may have identified as a green chili lover, but if you're working on a team of only red chili folks, you're going to have to find some other way to connect.
That's right. Although the red chili people understand that there are preferences, and it's more of a lighthearted, it's not, are you Republican or Democrat, right?
Right.
I mean, this is more of a lighthearted thing that everybody loves, actually, and it proves that you're unique. I tell you what, if you ever come to New Mexico and you start a speech there, you can start out with, okay, the answer on everybody's mind is green. Everybody will laugh and say, wow, okay, you did your research. You know something about us. You're going to instantly connect with your audience.
Right.
Anyway, what were the other 2 questions? Do you remember them?
I think it was around family. You know, Are you married? Do you have children? I think it was something like that. And then I want to say maybe it was a travel question, and I'm sorry that I don't remember. It was just
Farthest place you've been, or
something like that, or where would you most like to visit? Something along those lines. But yes, it's those types of questions that will ultimately connect us to others much more than, you know, I have my PhD in electrical engineering.
One of our major values in the last company I had with a lot of employees was part of orientation was GTKEO, which is get to know each other. And that was a big deal, and everybody knew the letters GTKEO at the end of it. And we would do little exercises, little prompts like that to do that, just to get people talking. Because you know one of my philosophies, it's hard to hate someone once you get to know them.
Absolutely.
And that's why we bring exchange students into our home, and you do too now, and a whole bit. And that's that's a big deal, right? The Boston Bomber would not have done what they did if they had a mentor and lived with an American family. It would be the presupposition on that. The point is, getting to know each other and connecting is the way to be able to relate to people, to be able to talk to people, to be able to establish the relationship that you're right that we all need. And so those things should be cherished. I mean, that's the thing. And so back to the point, does a 3/4 page bio do that for you? And back to the original question here of, I am so-and-so. If you are identifying so much with a certain thing, what does that do with the audience or the people you're talking to? What response does that get?
Yeah, does it build walls or does it tear it down?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And isn't that the real purpose of an introduction, is to be able to relate to someone versus identify yourself as someone that is either boring or not worth listening to, or credible and worth listening to.
Yeah. I don't know how much of our audience is going to be in front of a stage or on a stage in front of others having to give some sort of a presentation. But I think getting back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of, what does that do to you mentally? What does that do to you in your confidence, in your posture, when you have just that I am statement and that's who you believe you are, does it limit you in your ability to engage, and does it limit you in creativity? I'm asking some of those curious questions because if it is a definitive statement and that's solely how you see yourself, does it prevent you from exploring other avenues?
So, in the shorthand of America, how are you doing? Fine. As a metaphor to that, I think that it's reasonable for us to do exchanges based on what you were identifying earlier as the levels of engagement that you need to accomplish. If this is a long-term relationship, I am many things. Here's a list of some of them in an attempt to connect is probably a better answer if it's going to be a new in-law, right, or a new part of the family. If it's your used car salesman, then it's not as important.
Right.
If it's somebody in the grocery store that you're asking a question of, or in the park, my wife and I walk around the park every day, and or try to. I shouldn't put that out there like a qualification.
I am a walker daily.
But I'm a daily walker. I am a daily walker. I'm not a daily walker, but I'm an attempted daily walker. Anyway, there's many. I love to have conversations. This one lady's pulling on her dog, and I just said, "Oh, beautiful dog," and she goes, "Yeah, but she's stubborn." And I said, in my experience, you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other. Stubborn and beauty kind of go together, right? And she laughed, and we had a great time with it, right? And I think that's the whole purpose of interacting with someone, is to have those kinds of interactions where they give both people a little bit of joy in their day, which they may need.
Yeah.
And we don't know what suffering people are doing in their daily life, and how many people are walking the park to clear their head, or to keep themselves from doing something bad, or just out of joy, or to get exercise. You just never know. And that's kind of the same way it is at work, or in any situation, shopping. You don't know what's going on in the other people's lives, and if we can identify with them, that's better. So what is that I am statement trying to do? Am I trying to identify with a certain group to build rapport, or am I trying to lord it upon somebody? Well, I'm this or that. What are you? Or am I trying to use a shorthand to just get a conversation going, which I think is probably most of us. We're not going to say, I am many things and list 20 things.
Right.
We probably haven't even thought about that long enough to say it. But usually I think we're just using it as a shorthand. Look, I'm an engineer, right? Hopefully there's other things you like about me.
Yeah. The one area that I want to bring up, because I fell into this trap for a long time, is when you find yourself thinking the word just in that I am statement. I am just. Whether you actually say the word just or not, and I know specific to me, I had a season where I might even say, oh, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. And what that does to tear yourself down is amazing without you realizing it. And it also causes somebody else, perhaps, to think less of that role that is so critical when you throw the caveat of just in that statement.
I have tremendous respect for people who stay at home with their children, because it helps guide them so much, so well. And and I've got kids in that situation. I've got coworkers in that situation. I've got friends in that situation. And it's hard to decide either one.
Yes.
It's hard to be a parent and say, I'm going to work. It's hard to be a parent that has to work 2 jobs. And it's hard to be a parent that's going to stay at home.
Yes.
And, no matter what your path and your decision and your journey, I'm going to honor it. But boy, saying I'm just a stay-at-home mom, or I am just anything, is the important part of the conversation, I think, because none of us are just X.
Right.
And that belittles the thing you're talking about, X. It belittles you, and it belittles the listener, quite frankly, because it doesn't allow them the opportunity to explore the many other facets of things that you are. And so I think that's a really good point to make, because I think that's Or let's ask it in the form of a question. Is it useful to think or to say, I am just X? And I would posit, probably not.
Right. And I know that there's other roles that maybe society deems as less important for whatever reason, whether it be historically, whether it be hierarchy on the totem pole, so to speak. And someone doing that role, that profession, that occupation, that task might find themselves saying, oh, I'm just this. But to your point, it's not fair to you, it's not fair to the listener, and it's not fair to the thing that you are doing. And I'm thinking about somebody that I heard say, oh, I'm just a bagger at a grocery store. And that person was clearly feeling embarrassed that they hadn't advanced more, that they hadn't achieved a higher position. And yet, that's a really important role. And I think we've even discussed this a few episodes ago, especially in the pandemic season when people were afraid to go out, they needed to get their necessities. Folks that were working in supermarkets were considered frontline workers. In situations like that, we see the critical nature of all jobs. And we need people to be available in all types of jobs to have this full range of service and care for humanity. And I think about somebody like Mike Rowe, who used to have the program, I don't even know if it's still on, Dirty Jobs.
Love that show.
Thinking about these tasks that many people don't want to do because they're gross and they're hot and they're sweaty and stinky and all of the things. And yet, what would happen if those jobs don't get done?
My favorite example of that, and it's out of the Bible, but it just makes the point. Who as an eye can say to the foot, you don't matter? Who as an ear can say to the stomach, we don't need you? We are all the body of humanity, and every part and every person has value. And that is, I'll argue that one all day. And that is one that I think is a principle that people need to understand. I think in our society, especially in America, we love to think about salary as the definition of our worth. And I think that that's a problem.
I think it is too.
There's just no reason why a caregiver who is not paid as a family member, or who is paid, or as a neighbor as a caregiver is one of the most important jobs in America today. And the fact that even as a professional caregiver, you're not going to make as much as a brain surgeon or a specialized something has no basis in indication of how important it is. None.
Yeah.
The fact that society doesn't pay as much for it is not an indication of how valuable the work is.
Well, so I think maybe we close out with some curious questions. Are you including the phrase just in your self-description? I am just a blank. Are you thinking that about someone else? They are just a fill in the blank. And if the answer is yes to either one of those questions, what can you do to reframe your thinking so that you honor yourself and you honor others?
And be curious about the other value that person or yourself has within the whole human fabric, which, and I guarantee the answer is more than just.
Absolutely. All right, as always, we welcome your feedback. If you've got something you want to share, hit us up at the webpage curiositynotjudgment.com, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.